The mist clung to the ruins like a living thing, curling around the jagged edges of broken towers and drifting across empty streets. Every step Captain Daniel Reeve took seemed to disappear into it, swallowed by the endless gray. His visor's faint blue glow cast just enough light to see the ground beneath his boots, but beyond that, the city was nothing but shadows. He had been told this mission was simple. Get in, find the signal source, get out. But the encrypted message that had reached him through military channels 2 nights ago had been far from simple. She's alive. Find her before they do. He knew exactly who she was. Princess Erin of the Varen Empire, the last surviving heir after the siege of her homeworld. He had met her during the worst days of the war, when humans and Varens fought together against a common enemy. She had pulled him from the wreckage of a collapsing blast corridor on Callus Station, her hands gripping his armor as explosions shook the walls. When they parted after the war, her last words had been almost a whisper. If you ever find me in the dark, come back for me. Now the darkness was all around him, and somewhere in it, she was waiting. The ruins of the old council hall rose ahead, its once proud spire leaning at a dangerous angle. The structure was half buried in rubble, the windows smashed, banners hanging in shreds from the upper floors. If the intel was right, she was being held somewhere beneath it. Daniel slipped through the cracked main doors, the sound of his breathing loud in the still air. Inside, the hall was colder, the air stale with the scent of dust and stone. Moonlight filtered weakly through holes in the roof, forming pale silver pools on the cracked floor. He kept to the edges of the walls, scanning for movement. Every creak, every soft crumbled debris under his boots made his pulse quicken. The enemy patrols were said to move like shadows themselves, silent, fast, and merciless. Halfway down a collapsed corridor, he heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the empty building. A voice. It was faint at first, a thread of sound carried on the cold air. Is someone there? Daniel froze, his rifle steady, his body angled toward the sound. He moved closer, step by step, until the corridor opened into a wide chamber lit only by a shaft of moonlight through a gap in the roof. She was there. Princess Erin sat with her back against the wall, her once pristine gown torn and dirt-stained, strands of her silver hair loose and tangled around her face. Even through the dust and exhaustion, her violet eyes locked onto him, sharp and alive, her lips parted, her voice breaking on the words. Daniel, you came back for me? Before he could answer, movement rippled in the shadows behind her. 3 figures emerged, enemy scouts, their armor black and featureless, weapons humming with low energy. Daniel acted on instinct. His first shot dropped the closest scout instantly, the bright flash lighting the chamber for a heartbeat. The second charged forward, but Daniel met him head-on, slamming his armored shoulder into the attacker's chest and sending him crashing into the wall. The third raised his weapon toward Erin, but she rolled aside just as Daniel's shot tore through the air, striking the enemy in the exposed joint of his armor. The fight was over in seconds, the silence rushing back in. Daniel crossed the room quickly, kneeling beside her. Can you walk? She nodded, but her movements were slow, stiff from days of confinement. They've been searching for me. You don't understand, this city isn't safe. There's something here, something worse than them. His voice was steady, his hand reaching to help her up. Then tell me while we're moving. They slipped back into the corridor, the mist outside already creeping through the broken doors. The faint hum of engines was in the air now, growing louder, more scouts, maybe worse. As they moved through the ruins, Daniel stayed between her and the open streets, his rifle ready. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every corner felt like it might hide another patrol. When they reached the outer wall of the council hall, Erin hesitated. This is where it gets harder. They blocked the main streets. If we head east, we'll be trapped. Then we don't go east, Daniel said without slowing. They crossed a broken courtyard where statues lay toppled, their stone faces shattered. The mist swirled thicker here, muffling the sound of their footsteps, but also made it impossible to see more than a few meters ahead. A sudden metallic clatter echoed from somewhere to their left, the sound of boots on loose debris. Daniel grabbed her arm, pulling her behind the wreckage of an overturned transport. Through the fog, dark shapes moved past, 5, maybe 6, armed and scanning the streets. They waited, breath held, until the patrol faded back into the haze. Only then did they move again, faster this time, the darkness pressing all around them. But Erin's voice was clear when she spoke. "You shouldn't have come for me. You've put yourself in more danger than you know." Daniel glanced at her, his eyes hard but calm. "You saved my life once. I'm just returning the favor." They disappeared into the mist, the sound of the engines fading behind them. But ahead, somewhere in the city's shadowed streets, another danger was waiting. The mist in the streets was thicker now, curling between the broken walls and crumbling rooftops. Daniel kept his rifle raised, his eyes scanning every shadow. Beside him, Erin moved quietly, her torn gown whispering against the debris as they passed. They had put several blocks between themselves and the council hall, but the danger hadn't lessened. Every step felt like walking on glass, each sound too loud in the heavy air. "Which way?" Daniel asked in a low voice. Erin pointed to the right, toward a street lined with fallen statues and shattered windows. "There's a service tunnel ahead. It used to connect to the Palace District, but now, I'm not sure if it's clear." Daniel gave a small nod. If it's covered, it's safer than being out here. They moved quickly but carefully, weaving between rubble piles and leaning buildings. The air smelled of smoke and rust, a sharp reminder of how long the city had been dying. Halfway down the street, a faint hum reached Daniel's ears, the sound of a patrol drone. He stopped instantly, pulling Erin into the shadow of a broken archway. The drone floated into view, its dark metal shell reflecting the faint moonlight. Its red sensor light swept across the street, pausing where the dust had been disturbed by their footsteps. Daniel's grip on his rifle tightened, but he didn't fire. A shot would bring every patrol within 2 blocks. He waited, holding his breath, until the drone moved on, the hum fading into the mist. Only then did he motion for Erin to move again. When they reached the service tunnel entrance, Daniel saw that the heavy metal doors were half open, bent out of shape. Something had forced its way inside recently. Erin's voice was tense. "If the tunnel's compromised, we'll be trapped." Daniel glanced at her, his tone calm but firm. "Then we'll make sure it's not." They stepped inside, the darkness swallowing them instantly. Daniel switched his visor to low-light mode, the green display outlining the rough stone walls and scattered debris. The tunnel sloped downward, the air cooler and damp. Water dripped somewhere ahead, each drop echoing like a slow heartbeat. Halfway through, a sound broke the steady rhythm, the scrape of metal against stone. Daniel raised his hand, signaling Erin to stop. From the shadows ahead, 2 figures emerged, not patrol soldiers, but scavengers. Their armor was mismatched, their weapons crude but deadly. One of them grinned, his voice mocking. "Well, what do we have here? A human soldier and a princess. Looks like our luck just turned." Daniel stepped forward, keeping Erin behind him. "You don't want to do this." The second scavenger laughed. "Oh, we do. The court pays for information, and others will pay for her." Daniel didn't wait for them to move first. His rifle came up, the first shot striking the floor at their feet, a warning blast that lit the tunnel in a flash of green. The grin vanished from the leader's face. "You're making a mistake." Daniel's voice was ice. "No, I'm giving you a chance to walk away." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then the scavengers backed into the shadows, muttering curses, their footsteps fading away. Erin exhaled slowly, her voice low. They weren't with the patrols. "No," Daniel said. "This city's full of people looking to make a profit. We're just the newest prize." They pushed on, the tunnel narrowing until they reached a rusted ladder leading up to a hatch. Daniel climbed first, testing the metal before putting his weight on it. When he pushed the hatch open, cool night air rushed in. They stepped out into a courtyard surrounded by cracked walls, the mist lighter here. Erin looked around, her eyes scanning the dark shapes of buildings. "We're close to the river. If we follow it, we can reach the outer district." Daniel checked the sky. The faint red glow of patrol beacons was moving in their direction. "They're sweeping this way. We move now." They slipped into the narrow alleys, the sound of the river growing louder. The buildings here were older, their doors boarded and windows broken, giving the streets a hollow, empty feel. For a moment, Daniel thought they were alone, until a flicker of movement caught his eye. A shape stepped out from a doorway ahead, blocking their path. It was a man, tall, wearing a long coat with the hood pulled low. The way he stood told Daniel instantly this wasn't a random encounter. The man's voice was calm, almost casual. "Going somewhere, Captain?" Daniel's rifle didn't lower. Depends on who's asking. The hood lifted just enough to reveal sharp, familiar features. Aaron's eyes widened. "Corinne." Daniel's grip tightened on his weapon. "You know him?" Aaron nodded slowly, her tone guarded. "Yes, and if he's here, this just got more complicated." The mist swirled around them, and Daniel realized the darkness wasn't just the cities. It was closing on all sides. The mist hung heavy between the broken buildings, curling around the three figures as they stood in the narrow street. Daniel's rifle stayed steady in his hands. The faint hum of its power sealed the only sound. Erin's expression was unreadable, but her eyes stayed locked on the hooded man before them. "Corinne," she said again, her voice quieter this time, as if speaking his name might draw unwanted attention. Corinne's hood fell back, revealing sharp, angular features and eyes that carried a glint of amusement. "You're a hard pair to find in this city," he said lightly, though there was weight behind the words. "And you, Princess, I didn't think you'd still be breathing." Daniel didn't lower his weapon. "You two know each other?" Aaron's answer came slowly. "Yes, before the war ended. Corinne worked for my father, briefly. He was a scout, a guide, until he decided loyalty was worth less than the highest bidder's coin." Corinne smiled faintly, unbothered by the accusation. "Survival comes in many forms, Princess. I chose mine." Daniel's voice was flat. "Why are you here now?" Corinne glanced past him into the mist, as if checking for shadows they couldn't see. "I could say I'm here out of kindness, but you wouldn't believe me, and you'd be right not to. Let's just say I know the patrol patterns, and you're heading straight into their net." Daniel's grip on his rifle didn't loosen. "We're doing fine without you." Corinne chuckled softly. "You're walking blind to a city full of eyes, Captain. The palace guards want her back in chains. The scavenger gangs want her for ransom in the shadows." His tone shifted, losing its humor. "The shadows want her for something else entirely." Aaron stepped forward, ignoring Daniel's small gesture to stay back. "What do you mean by the shadows?" Corinne's gaze flicked to her, then to Daniel. "There are things in this city that move when the mist is thickest. Not soldiers, not men. They come from the deep ruins, and when they take someone, they don't come back." Daniel studied him for a moment, weighing his words. "Why help us? What do you get?" Corinne's smirk returned. "Maybe I get the satisfaction of seeing the princess owing me a favor. Or maybe I'm just curious how far you'll go before you decide you need me." Aaron's tone was sharp. "You're not joining us. Not unless Daniel says so." Daniel didn't answer right away. He listened. And there was, faint but growing, the distant thump of boots, the mechanical whine of a drone engine. The patrol was closing in. He lowered the rifle slightly, but kept it ready. "You know a way around the patrols?" Corinne nodded once. "Follow me. But if you fall behind, I don't wait." They moved quickly, Corinne taking narrow side alleys Daniel wouldn't have noticed in the thick fog. The walls here were so close they scraped Daniel's armor, and more than once they had to step over collapsed beams or duck under hanging cables. Erin walked between them, her gaze constantly scanning the mist. Daniel caught her glancing at Corinne a few times, her expression tight, part suspicion, part calculation. After several turns, they reached a dead end, or so it seemed. Corinne crouched beside a stack of broken crates and pushed them aside, revealing a metal hatch in the ground. "This drops into the old drainage system," Corinne said. "It'll take us close to the river, without crossing the main streets." Daniel peered down the dark opening. The air rising from it was damp and smelled faintly of metal and decay. Aaron's voice was uncertain. "And what's waiting for us down there?" Corinne shrugged. "Less than what's about to catch us up here. The sound of boots was closer now, echoing through the mist. Daniel made the call. Go. I'll follow behind. Corinne went first, disappearing into the darkness below. Erin followed, her gown catching slightly on the edge before she pulled it free. Daniel dropped down last, sealing the hatch above them just as the glow of patrol lights began to filter into the alley above. The tunnel was narrow, the walls slick with moisture. Their footsteps echoed softly, and the only light came from Daniel's visor. Corinne moved ahead with the ease of someone who had traveled these passages many times. You can thank me later, Captain. Without me, you'd both be in chains by morning. Daniel's reply was curt. Or dead by your hand. The night's not over yet. In the darkness, Erin's voice was quiet but clear. Daniel, if he turns on us, you do what you have to do. He didn't answer, but his silence was enough to make the promise. The tunnel bent sharply, and the sound of rushing water grew louder. Somewhere ahead, there was an exit or another trap waiting for them. The tunnel walls narrowed as they moved, forcing Daniel to angle his shoulders. Moisture dripped steadily from overhead, and the floor was slick beneath their boots. Corinne led without hesitation, his footsteps quiet, his head turning occasionally to check behind them. Not much farther, Corinne said, his voice echoing off the stone. The river is just ahead. Once we're out, we'll follow it west toward the outer districts. Erin kept her eyes forward, her voice low. You make it sound easy. It's not, Corinne replied. But if we stay down here too long, we're easy prey. Daniel didn't like the way Corinne said prey. He noticed Erin tense slightly at the word too. The air grew colder, and the sound of rushing water became clearer. They rounded a bend, and a faint light shimmered ahead, moonlight reflecting off the moving river through a grated exit. Corinne approached the grate and crouched. We'll have to force it open. Help me? Daniel stepped up beside him, gripping the rusted metal. With a loud, grinding screech, they pulled the grate free, the sound echoing through the tunnel. That was when Daniel froze. From the darkness behind them came a faint scraping, like claws dragging across stone. Erin turned quickly, her eyes scanning the shadows. Daniel, something's there. He brought his rifle up, the beam from his visor cutting a narrow path of light into the tunnel. At first, there was nothing but the wet walls and dripping water. Then something moved. It was low to the ground, its shape shifting with the mist. Two glints like pale eyes reflected the light for an instant, then vanished. Corinne's voice lost its casual tone. We don't want to meet them down here. Out! Now! Daniel motioned Erin through the opening first. She stepped out onto the narrow ledge beside the river, the cold night air rushing over them. Daniel followed, his rifle still aimed at the tunnel mouth. Corinne came last, pulling the grate halfway back into place just as a shape slid into view inside the tunnel. It was bigger now, moving faster, but the grate cut off the sight of it before Daniel could get a clear look. Erin's voice was sharp. What are those? Corinne shook his head. Not patrols. Not scavengers. The people here call them shadow hunters. They follow the mist, and they don't stop. Daniel kept his gaze on the dark tunnel opening. They'll come through eventually. Not if we're gone by then, Corinne said, starting along the riverbank. The path was narrow, the ground uneven, and the water moved fast beside them. They moved quickly, the ruined city rising on their left, the river stretching into the distance on their right. Overhead, the mist was thinner, but the streets above were still dangerous. Every few minutes, Daniel glanced back, half expecting to see the pale glint of those eyes again. Erin kept pace, but Daniel could see she was tiring. Her gown was torn further from the climb, and her breathing was heavy. Corinne noticed, too. There's a place to rest ahead. Not safe for long, but better than standing out in the open. They reached a cluster of broken river barges, pulled halfway onto the shore. Corinne ducked into one that had collapsed on its side, creating a small, sheltered space. Inside, it smelled of damp wood and rust, but it was hidden from the main bank. Daniel kept watch at the entrance, while Erin sat on a dry patch of plank. She looked at him, her voice softer now. You didn't have to come back for me. Daniel's eyes stayed on the river. Yes, I did. Before she could answer, Corinne crouched beside them, his tone urgent. "They're moving along the bank. I saw one just now. It was watching from the shadows." Daniel checked the charge on his rifle. "We can't stay here, then. We move." They left the shelter and pushed farther west, the moonlight glinting on the water beside them. The sound of the city grew fainter, replaced by the constant rush of the river. But the sense of being followed never left. Once, Daniel thought he heard the faint scrape of claws on stone again, this time from the riverside. When they reached an old stone bridge, Corinne stopped. "Across here, there's an abandoned guard post on the other side. If it's still intact, we can use it to regroup." They crossed quickly, boots clattering on the worn stone. Halfway across, Erin froze, her eyes wide. Something moved beneath the bridge, its pale eyes glimmering up at them before vanishing into the dark water. Daniel tightened his grip on the rifle. "Go. Now!" They reached the far side and climbed up the embankment toward the outline of the guard post, the door hanging slightly open. Inside, the air was stale but dry, and the walls still held. For the moment, they had a place to breathe, but Daniel knew the night wasn't done with them. The abandoned guard post was small, a single room with cracked stone floor, a rusted weapon rack, and a broken table shoved into a corner. Moonlight streamed through a shattered window, spilling across the floor in pale stripes. Daniel closed the door behind them and checked the bolt. It slid into place with a reluctant metallic scrape. "It'll hold," he said, "for now." Erin sat on the table's edge, catching her breath. Her violet eyes scanned the dark corners of the room. "This place hasn't been used in years." Corinne moved to the window, leaning just far enough to glance outside. "That's why it's perfect. Nobody thinks to look here." Daniel didn't relax. He moved along the walls, checking for weak spots, listening for any sound beyond the wind and river. It was too quiet, the kind of quiet that meant something was listening back. Erin spoke softly. "What exactly are these shadow hunters? You've both seen them. I only caught their eyes." Corinne turned from the window. "They're not soldiers. They're not human or Varen or anything else I've ever known. They came after the city fell. They hunt the mist, and they hunt whatever's in it. Fast, strong, and they don't stop until they feed." Daniel's jaw tightened. "And they're tracking us." The words had barely left his mouth when a faint scratching sound came from outside the wall. It was slow at first, almost gentle, but it grew into a rough scrape, claws on stone. Erin stood quickly, her gaze flicking to the door. "They've found us." Daniel moved to the window, visor scanning the mist outside. Shapes shifted between the trees along the riverbank, not walking, but gliding low to the ground. Their pale eyes glimmered faintly whenever they caught the moonlight. Corinne's tone was sharp. "They'll test the walls first, looking for a way in." Daniel checked the charge on his rifle. "Then we make sure they don't find one." The first hit came from the side, a heavy thud against the outer wall, making dust drift from the ceiling. The second came a heartbeat later, shaking the door in its frame. Daniel took position at the window, the rifle's muzzle glowing faintly as it powered up. The moment one of the creatures darted into view, he fired. The bolt lit the mist for an instant, striking the shadow mid-leap. It shrieked, a sound like metal tearing underwater, before vanishing from sight. Another slammed against the door. The bolt rattled, the old wood creaking. Corinne moved to cover the entrance, drawing a short, curved blade from his coat. "You keep shooting, Captain. If they come through here, they meet me." Erin crouched beside the broken table, pulling free a length of jagged wood. "I'm not sitting still if they break through." Daniel fired again, catching another creature as it scrambled up the wall toward the window. It fell back into the darkness, but more shapes moved in the mist beyond. The scratching came again, now from above, claws scraping over the roof. "One's climbing," Erin warned. Daniel pivoted toward the ceiling's corner, waiting, and then the board above splintered as a dark, twisting shape forced its way through. It dropped into the room, landing between Daniel and Erin. The thing's body was long and sinewy, its skin black and wet-looking, its limbs bending in unnatural ways. Its mouth opened too wide, rows of jagged teeth glinting in the dim light. Daniel fired at point-blank range, the shot punching through its chest. The creature screeched and collapsed, but its claws still twitched even as it stilled. Another slammed against the door, cracking it down the center. Corinne snarled and met the break with his blade, driving it into the gap just as the creature on the other side tried to push through. There was a sharp cry, and the pressure on the door eased. Daniel reloaded quickly, moving to cover Corinne. More shapes were pulling back into the mist now, but their eyes still glowed faintly in the distance, watching, waiting. "They're testing us," Daniel said. "They'll come again." Corinne glanced at the window. "Not if we move now. They'll circle back, but it'll give us a head start." Aaron nodded quickly. "We can't stay here." Daniel opened the door slowly, scanning the bank outside. The mist was moving differently now, curling around the trees and drifting toward the bridge they had crossed earlier. The shadows were following the flow away from the guard post. "This is our chance," Daniel said. "Stay close. If they come back, we run for the river." They slipped out into the night, leaving the dead creature on the floor and the guard post behind them. The mist closed again, but this time they didn't slow. The mist thinned slightly as they left the guard post, but the silence was heavier than before. Daniel kept his rifle ready, scanning the riverbank ahead. Corinne walked a few paces in front, his hood up again, while Aaron stayed close to Daniel's side. They moved west along the river for nearly 10 minutes, without a sound but the rush of water. Daniel's instincts were screaming. This quiet wouldn't last. Aaron broke the silence first. "Those things, the shadow hunters. Do they follow all the way to the outer districts?" Corinne answered without looking back. "They follow as far as the mist goes. And tonight, the mist is deep." Daniel glanced over his shoulder. The bank behind them was empty, but he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The memory of those pale eyes in the darkness stayed with him. They rounded a bend in the river and stopped. Ahead, a stone wall blocked the bank, and beyond it, the faint glow of lights, patrol lights. Corinne crouched low, motioning for them to follow his lead. "Outer district checkpoint. It's not the main gate, but it's guarded, and they're not going to wave us through." Daniel studied the scene. 4 soldiers stood at the barrier, their armor gleaming faintly under the lamps. 2 more paced the top of the wall, rifles slung but ready. "They'll see us the moment we step out of the shadows," Daniel said. "And if we turn back—" "The hunters catch us," Aaron finished quietly. Corinne's mouth curved into a thin smile. "Exactly. So, Captain, what's it going to be? Guns or claws?" Daniel didn't like either option. "Is there another way?" "There's always another way," Corinne said, "but it's worse." Aaron frowned. "How worse?" Corinne pointed to the black water of the river. "The current bypasses the wall through a covert. It's half collapsed, no light, sharp metal edges everywhere. And the hunters sometimes take the water when they're hungry." Daniel considered it. "We'll be exposed if we take the checkpoint, but in the water, we're blind." Aaron looked at him, her voice steady despite the danger. "Choose. We can't stay here." A low, distant scrape of claws on stone answered for them. Daniel turned. In the mist behind, faint shapes were moving along the bank, low and fast. "They're here," Daniel said. "Corinne, the covert. Where?" Corinne was already moving toward the waterline. "Follow me, and try not to get caught on the metal." They waded into the river, the cold biting through their clothes. The current pushed against them immediately, strong enough that Daniel had to brace himself to stay upright. Aaron gripped his arm for balance, her breath catching at the shock of the temperature. The culvert mouth loomed ahead, a dark, jagged hole in the stone wall. Rusted iron bars jutted from the edges where a grate had once been. Water surged through it with a deep, constant roar. Corinne slipped inside first, vanishing into darkness. Daniel followed, keeping Aaron close behind. Inside, the sound of the river filled their ears, echoing off the narrow stone walls. The space was just wide enough for them to move in single file, hunched against the low ceiling. Water splashed against their knees, icy and fast. Every scrape of their boots on the stone felt too loud. The hunters couldn't fit in here, could they? Daniel wasn't sure. Halfway through, Aaron spoke, her voice almost lost in the noise. Something's in the water. Daniel stopped instantly, visor light sweeping the current. For a second, there was nothing. Then a ripple moved against the flow, too fast and too smooth to be debris. Corinne's voice came from ahead. Move. Now. They pushed forward faster, the water pulling harder at their legs. The ripple followed, closing the distance. Daniel turned just as a pale shape broke the surface behind them. Long, slick, and fast, jaws snapping with a sound like bone cracking. He fired into the water, the shot flashing bright in enclosed space. The creature recoiled, vanishing beneath the surface, but the current churned violently now. Corinne shouted over the roar. Exits ahead. A faint rectangle of moonlight appeared, growing brighter as they neared it. They burst out of the culvert into open air, stumbling onto a narrow bank beyond the wall. Daniel pulled Aaron up beside him, scanning the water. The pale shape lingered just below the surface for a moment before drifting back into the darkness. Corinne was already climbing the embankment toward the shadows of the outer district. "Congratulations," he called quietly. "You survived the easy part." Daniel gave Aaron a quick look. She was pale from the cold, but her eyes were steady. They were past the wall, but the night in the outer district held dangers of its own. The outer district was quieter than the city they had left, but not safe. The streets here were wide and cracked, lined with abandoned market stalls and half-collapsed buildings. Dim lanterns flickered in the distance, casting long, broken shadows across the ground. Daniel moved ahead slowly, his rifle raised. Behind him, Aaron walked close, her gown torn and damp from the river, her silver hair catching the faint light. Corinne trailed behind, his eyes scanning the rooftops. "We're close," Corinne said quietly. "There's an old transit station a few streets over. If the tunnel isn't blocked, it leads out into the hills." Daniel didn't slow. "What's guarding it?" Corinne's smirk was faint. "Depends who got there first, the patrols or the hunters." Aaron glanced at Daniel. "Then we have no time to waste." They moved through the narrow side streets until the station came into view, a squat, wide building with its roof mostly intact. The large entry doors hung open, one swaying slowly in the wind. Daniel didn't like it. Too open, too quiet. He signaled for them to stop. Corinne stepped beside him. "You're thinking it's a trap." "I'm thinking we check before we walk into it," Daniel said. He moved forward carefully, stepping over broken tiles and shattered glass. Inside, the air smelled stale and metallic. Rows of empty benches lined the walls, and the floor was covered in a thin layer of dust, except for a set of fresh tracks leading deeper inside. Corinne crouched to look at them. Boots. Military issue. Aaron's voice was tense. Patrols, then. The sound came before Daniel could reply. The sharp click of a weapon being readied. From the far end of the room, soldiers stepped into view, their armor gleaming faintly under the weak light. For them, rifles raised. The lead soldier's voice was cold. "Princess Aaron, by order of the court, you will come with us." Daniel stepped in front of her, his rifle already up. "She's not going anywhere with you." The soldier didn't flinch. "You can't protect her forever. Human. Step aside." Daniel's answer was a single shot, the blast striking the wall beside the soldier's head. The room erupted. The soldiers opened fire, bolts slicing to the dusty air. Daniel pulled Aaron down behind one of the benches, returning fire in controlled bursts. Corinne moved to the side, his blade flashing as one soldier tried to flank them. The fight was quick but brutal. Daniel dropped two with precise shots. Corinne cut down another, and the last tried to retreat but fell under Daniel's fire. The station was silent again, except for their breathing. Aaron rose slowly, her eyes scanning the fallen soldiers. "They would have taken me back to the palace, or worse." Daniel lowered his rifle, but didn't relax. "That's why I came back." Corinne wiped his blade on a soldier's cloak, his tone casual. "Tunnel's probably clear now. Let's move before we get more company." They followed him down into the lower level of the station. The tunnel entrance was dark, the tracks stretching into the shadows beyond. Daniel walked beside Aaron as they moved forward. The air here was cooler, carrying the faint scent of earth and stone. After a while, The tunnel began to slope upward, and a dim circle of moonlight appeared ahead. They stepped out into the open hills. The ruined city spread out behind them in the distance. For the first time that night, Daniel allowed himself to breathe easier. They had made it out. Corin adjusted his hood, glancing toward the horizon. "This is where I leave you. My debt's paid." Daniel met his gaze. "Wasn't sure you had one." Corin gave a faint smile and walked away into the shadows, disappearing without a sound. Aaron stood beside Daniel, looking at the city. "You risked everything to come back." "Why?" Daniel reached into his coat, pulling out a small case. He opened it, and the ring inside caught the moonlight, the crystal glowing faintly. "Because I made a promise," he said simply, "and I keep my promises." Her eyes softened as she took the ring, slipping it onto her finger. The crystal flared brighter, its glow reflecting in her violet eyes. Behind them, the city was silent, but Daniel knew the danger wasn't gone. Still, for now, they had a head start, and they had each other.